It's the Redbird Reboot podcast. Are you ready to get rebooted, Cardinals fans? He settles down, at least in the zone, and does not stop running.
Blake Murphy.
This is the identity for the Arizona Cardinals.
The run defense is just horrendous, and it's been horrendous for the Cardinals for a long time.
And Marcos Labrada.
He's going to bring over his philosophy. It should make it better.
Present the hottest NFL podcast from the country's hottest state.
He should be turning around the logo.
Actually, some breaking news we can cover here. This popped up just about, 6 minutes ago.
It's Redbird Reboot.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans. Welcome in. It is the Redbird Reboot podcast. We are excited to be here. Now, we're here probably a day a little bit later than what we'd expected. We were thinking the Arizona Cardinals were going to wrap up their coaching search probably on Wednesday. They had Mike LaFleur in. They did not actually wrap things up with Mike LaFleur. He left without a deal, per NFL Network's Mike Garafolo. Cardinals were looking at potentially having him come back, him thinking about the job, but we got to find out why pretty quickly after the fact, and that was that the Cardinals have only one job that's been left on the market. We'll talk a little bit about some of the other coaching options that were filled, and then we'll talk a little bit, at least, of course, about some of the remaining options for the Cardinals, but it's going to be all eyes on one interview this Saturday with Klint Kubiak, the Cardinals' rival, or the offensive coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks. And I'll pull up a picture for those of you watching on our live stream, but he's right there. He is ready to roll with whatever team he ends up with. There's only 3 teams, Marcos, that he can be present for. It's going to be either the Seattle Seahawks. He'll go back there. The Las Vegas Raiders have the number 1 overall pick. More cap space than the Cardinals. I believe they're number 2 in cap space overall. Some talent on offense. Some difficulties that they need some additional talent on defense in the offensive line. They got a talented running back and tight end combination, whereas the Cardinals, they've got their roster set up, but they are in need of a quarterback, something that we would assume the Las Vegas Raiders are going to fix with drafting Fernando Mendoza, probably with the number 1 overall pick. As we get going, talking about where the Cardinals are at, all of this last-minute coaching drama, how are you doing as we kick off our Redbird Reboot show?
All right, well, apologies to everybody. I was the one that's actually running late, so I see you guys in the chat. I'm feeling pretty confused. I kind of want to have more of a direction. I was kind of hoping that the Cardinals were going to be more zeroed into like one candidate. That's usually what you see from an organization that usually tends to have at least an idea of what they're going to do or what kind of plan they have. So when I heard the wide net argument again, I thought to myself, okay, we're probably going to be one of the last organizations to hire a head coach, mostly because of the fact that when you're saying that, you're saying, hey, we're going to conduct a bunch of interviews, we're going to turn every stone, we're going to do this. That's mostly talk of saying like, hey guys, we're going to try our best to get somebody, but we'll get someone.
Yeah, and it's something at least where it was very interesting, at least, to see with all of the changes that have popped up over the last week, because it felt like the Cardinals were bringing LaFleur in on Tuesday. They had him stay overnight, got him his nice meal, and then they had a whole day of touring the facilities. And then starting day 3, you were like, all right, when's it going to happen? And it turns out that, of course, that there was no deal that actually was put into place. Let's get to another 2 comments that we have here. We've got the sociology professor saying, hello, gents. We all know who that sociology professor is, of course. Got a couple of comments saying, Klint Kubiak, new head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. And then, of course, we got Nick L. is saying, cancel the interview. He's going to the Raiders. It's going to be a waste of time. That is where it seems to be present. And I think, Marcos, we can talk a bit about why the Cardinals are following up with this, because a lot of people are saying it's Raiders or bust is what it feels like. They seem to be in just a better spot. A lot of questions have popped up about whether the Cardinals are being used as leverage. And this could be, picture Klint Kubiak. He's walking into the meeting with the Raiders. Raiders say, you're going to listen to Tom Brady. You're going to hire the coaches we want you to hire. You're going to draft the players we want you to draft. You're just going to coach the team. Klint Kubiak can go, well, wait a minute. Hold up here. Those Arizona Cardinals over there, they're offering me a 6-year deal, an extra year to me, and they're giving me roster control, giving me a bit more that I'll be able to do. And I get to pick a quarterback at least that I'm going to like. Maybe that I'm not the biggest fan of Fernando Mendoza versus being able to pick a quarterback that you like or have either maybe not worked with before necessarily, but saying that you like potentially 2027 draft class, you get a little bit more time to work on it. You get to get maybe a guy you like better. All of that, I think, at least, is probably going to be a little bit of bull, Marcos. Just a little bit of that, where you're talking about this is probably going to be more of with leverage games. It's just how agents play the game. It's how coaches will play the game. It's even how the likes of Mike LaFleur will play the game, where he left without a deal. He didn't just take the best offer from the Arizona Cardinals. So that brings up the question, why are the Cardinals doing this? And I think that you and I have our suspicions as far as why Arizona is going through with this interview, but I kind of want to hear from you. What do you think is the biggest reason why the Cardinals are continuing to go through with what some people are calling a farcical process, or is it a farcical process? And is there a chance that Kubiak is going to be an option for Arizona in the end, and a serious option?
Well, hope is number one. It's to say like, hey, we want to give this guy at least the opportunity to interview. We have no idea if this is going to be a leverage move or not, so we wouldn't know that. Had we just canceled it straight out, like they wouldn't know. Oh, hey, maybe Kubiak did want to actually become the coach of the Arizona Cardinals, but we never even gave him the opportunity to interview. Is that most likely? No, I don't. I don't believe that that's the likely scenario. All reports are pointing towards him wanting to go over to the Raiders and using the Arizona Cardinals as a leverage move. And with that being said, you would think the Cardinals would be smart enough to like know that. So in some instances, I guess it's just going to be like a way to get the fans somewhat excited, giving them hope. But it does kind of suck that like you had your guys zeroed in Mike LaFleur. You thought to yourself, we thought to ourselves, okay, it's going to be a 2-day thing, which is serious at that point. As soon as the Los Angeles Rams lost, the Arizona Cardinals fans were thinking to themselves, all right, he's available now. Get this going so that we can start hiring the staff and taking this serious and not be like what it was last year with Jonathan Gannon. When Jonathan Gannon, we waited for him for after the Super Bowl. Obviously, they lost the Super Bowl in that situation, so it was kind of bittersweet. We hear the reports of like the players, especially like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, having some like negative words, and I believe it was Omar Epps as well. I think that's what his name is, coming out saying that Jonathan Gannon didn't take that serious, or he was just like not really above focused. And of course, we find out the the reason why is because the Super Bowl was hosted in Arizona, and they were having like meetings in the back end that were not supposed to be, that didn't follow the rules, and the players felt slighted because of that. And
Yeah.
we don't want to be in that situation again, where we're essentially just waiting last minute, and when everybody already has a job, like Raheem Morris is waiting there, and we hear that Raheem Morris wants to come to Arizona. If we can get both Mike LaFleur and Raheem Morris as an OC-DC combo with Mike, them being like co-coaches again, even though like we did it with Cliff, Mike LaFleur has actual like he has experience in the NFL. That wouldn't be the same situation as last time.
Right. It's very different from Cliff Kingsbury's situation, and that was the only situation where the Cardinals were the front runners, one of the first teams to hire. This is just not a desirable job right now, Marcos. It's never been a desirable location in Arizona. Even when the Cardinals had a quarterback, Kyler Murray was coming off of that ACL injury, and a lot of people looked at the Cardinals as picking with the first or second overall pick following in that next year's draft. Of course, Kyler did come back, was able to win enough games that the Cardinals did get to be able to draft Marvin Harrison Jr. instead of the quarterback class there. But a couple years down the road, they are in what we think is going to be probably the end of the Kyler Murray era. It feels like they shut him down intentionally. We're not able to get into position to get a quarterback in what seemed to be a good quarterback class until it actually became reality. This is the spot where you're talking about taking on a bit of a rebuild and having to wait an entire year before your likely quarterback savior, quote unquote, or at least the potential future franchise quarterback comes in 2027. That means unless you're able to strike it lucky with that quarterback in a rookie season, you're probably going to be looking at competitive play in 2028. That's your window. That's going to be almost 2 years away from right now, Marcos, that the Cardinals are going to be looking in their competitive nature of getting into the playoffs, getting a move on, getting a roll on. It's not necessarily going to be that much quicker for the likes of Klint Kubiak with the Raiders. If you want to argue and say the Chiefs are going to probably bounce back, the Broncos were the number one seed in the AFC this year, and the Chargers also made the playoffs. It's a pretty rough gig. I think the chances of Kubiak going back to Seattle, where he could potentially say, hey, I could go back to Seattle for a year, take on a job like, let's say the Bengals job opens up next year, suddenly he's coaching Joe Burrow, and that could be a more successful sort of a job. It's where he, at least right now, holds all of the cards, and he holds even more cards as well because Davis Webb, the essential backup plan for the Denver Broncos, he withdrew from consideration for the Raiders head coaching job. Essentially, he's going to be going back and likely being promoted to the offensive coordinator, right? I believe it was Pete Carmichael, longtime Sean Payton guy who had been there as the offensive coordinator, got let go from the team, which opened up a spot for him. This isn't just necessarily to say that he would have considered the Cardinals anyway, but it seems the Cardinals were not considering him. Now, last week, as far as what we had talked about with the Arizona Cardinals, as far as different options were concerned, we really had not seen Klint Kubiak as far as being a realistic option. And I don't think anything has changed about that. It feels in a lot of cases like the Cardinals and Michael Bidwell have two things that they're looking at. Either A, they really think they have a shot at Kubiak and they're being delusional, or B, they're wanting to go and basically blow him away, make him a bigger offer, give him more control. These are things, Marcos, the Cardinals have not been willing to give up. Michael Bidwell has in the past really struggled to give up control of the organization, give up control of having input on draft picks, something that we just have not seen previously. We've not seen him even be willing to hire a team president to be able to come in and be able to essentially take over the day-to-day operation, so he could just sit back, do what a lot of the great owners do, which is just say, hey, I'm going to invest the money here, you guys go get it done here, and I'll stay back out of the way and watch the investment continue to grow. There is a third option, and it's that the Cardinals are interviewing Klint Kubiak, not necessarily expecting to get the job, like they're going to give it a swing and they're expecting to strike out, but they could be interviewing him to get intel to say, hey, Klint, you beat up the Rams this year. You beat up us this year. You beat up the Niners this year. How did you do it? How would you go about beating all of these teams if you were the head coach of our team? Giving some inside info, perhaps. I personally don't see that as an option. I don't see it as being realistic unless Michael Bidwell is willing to say, hey, we're going to give you, like you talked about, the blank check, give it 6 years worth of contractual control, and we're going to take away Monti Ossenfort's ability to have final say on the roster, give that to you, something that the Raiders, with Tom Brady wanting some input, would not necessarily be saying. This all, I think, kind of points, Marcos, to it feels like the Cardinals are, in that sense, being a little bit delusional in that regard of they're swinging for the fences, but it feels kind of like if you've ever seen a movie like The Sandlot or others, kind of feels like you got one of those little kids in there going up against a major league pitcher. This is something where you are outgunned, outmanned, outmatched by a team in the Raiders. And it would not shock me overall if we end up seeing Klint Kubiak, as pictured here for you online viewers, does take the Raiders job or goes back to Seattle, which has begged the question, why not Cardinals just cancel the interview, move on with Mike LaFleur, and that's going to be something we'll discuss in a bit because it is interesting that he's still being considered by most insiders as an option for the Arizona Cardinals.
Well, as usual, they're doing their jobs as an agent or their agency job to be able to put more pressure on a team, just like you mentioned with the Raiders. That hey, the Cardinals want to hire me. They're going to give me an interview. I'm seriously considering them. Not really in his mind, but that's what he's gonna go ahead and talk to him about that, so that way it could put that pressure on them to be able to say, hey, if we don't make the opportunity, give him the offer that he wants or give him the stipulations that he wants, he's just going to go ahead and go over to the Cardinals who are going to offer him all that. Which, I mean, to be fair, if you're the Raiders organization, whoever that general manager is, he would call bull on that, because if he would know who Michael Bidwell is as an owner, he is the type of owner that you just said won't relinquish control, which sets us back. Doesn't like to give roster control. He's just in the picture, and being the owner that he is in the picture, it really irritates me that we have other owners that sit back and let the general manager do the work, let him do the hiring, let him do everything. He gives the owner the updates, and he's like, okay, this is the deal that I want to offer this guy. What do you think? Hey, as long as I trust what you're doing, that's why I hired as general manager. Go ahead and go forward with that move if you think that's what the best move is. But with the Cardinals, it's like Michael Bidwell has to sit there. He has to listen. He has to take him out for dinner. He has to give him the tour. And I'm like, why is Monty Ossenfort out there then? Monty Ossenfort's not going to be the one who's going to be making the decision. It's going to be Michael Bidwell.
Yeah, it's something at least that I'm very curious as to when it comes down to closing the deal. It's something that Michael Bidwell was not able to do with Mike LaFleur. And maybe it's just as simple as the Cardinals were the most undesirable of these jobs that are here. The Seahawks are maybe a more desirable spot as an OC for a year for Klint Kubiak. And if that's the case, just putting this out there, maybe Mike LaFleur, he's sitting back there going, hey, if the Cardinals don't get Kubiak, if the Raiders don't get Kubiak, suddenly if I sign this deal now with the Cardinals and suddenly the Raiders are looking at, they would have brought me on, why would I take that Cardinals job? I would be regretting that I could have had a better job available. Feels like in a lot of cases, this is one of those marriages that probably is going to be, you know, as someone has once said, if you're asking out a girl to the prom, I think we talked about this last week, and you can't go with a girl who doesn't want to also go with you. That's just the way that it goes in the way of the world. If you want to be with the Raiders and the Raiders want to be with Klint Kubiak and you're Mike LaFleur, okay, well, I get a choice of going back to the Rams where I can't call plays, or maybe I get to then be a head coaching candidate without having to worry about going through being an offensive play caller, jump some of that gap, get a head start on what's going to be probably about $5 to $6 million on a 5-year contract, some 20 plus $1 million guaranteed. Maybe I can leverage that in with a little bit more to get $30 million. It's harder as a first-time coach to get that, but that's usually the way that it goes. Is that those contracts are guaranteed for 5 years, whereas the coordinator contracts are guaranteed for 2 years. Now, we've got our sociology professor who's popping in at least to talk about some of this with our podfather, Joe Como, saying not defending Bidwell here, but he let Monty hire his handpicked candidate. He gets a situation where he kept Monty but views it as a short leash, so this could be a Michael decision. I could see it being a case where Monty Ossenfort wanted Campanelli. I could see that being the case. And Michael Bidwell wanted an offensive guy. And so they moved on from Campanelli and were able to compromise by going with an offensive guy. But the offensive guy that they both wanted was Klint Kubiak, a guy who's been in the division, has had success, and is in the Super Bowl right now. And of course, then part of where it might be with Michael Bidwell is I didn't fire Monty, but I'm going to be involved in hiring the next coach. And we've talked about this before, Marcos. Michael Bidwell is someone who, if nothing else, he does have a lot of a grip on the Cardinals organization in a way that we've said probably isn't the healthiest when it comes to how well managed, well structured teams are run, which I've said there's pros and cons to it. One of the pros as a Cardinals fan is he always will fire coaches when it's time to let those coaches go. The hardest thing I think a lot of people don't understand is because Arizona's not as desirable of a destination, it makes it really tough to bring the best coaching candidates in. There was no shot at a Jim Harbaugh. There was no shot at some of these other coaches. What you're probably best looking at when you're talking about the Arizona Cardinals is going to be a guy like a Mike LaFleur, who you can catch a year before he goes to another team, is a play caller. You can say that the Rams, maybe you're looking at replacing him in-house with Nate Scheelhaus. This is probably one of your better options that you could be able to get, and you let him walk out the door. Now, the question is, did he walk out the door on his own? Was that because the Cardinals were not able to close? Or was it something where the Cardinals simply were wanting to move on and address it with a Klint Kubiak instead and kind of hold off on making a hiring decision? Kind of like, hey, you know what? Mike, we love you, but here's the thing. We're trying to go to prom, and there's a prettier girl over here who might say yes to us. It's kind of a long shot, but just on the off chance she says yes to us, we'll hold on to that right here before we go to the big dance with you. Let's talk to this coach. That's how most Cardinals fans felt this week, and that's where a lot of Cardinals fans got very frustrated and downright depressed when Mike LaFleur walked right out that door after 2 days of staying in there with the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like you mentioned, because they have that little glimpse of a shot and whatnot. They're trying to bring hope to the fan base and say, "Hey, we are being taken serious." Did you see what Michael? But did you see what Klint Kubiak just did on that last play? How he sequenced that, how he called the perfect corner route and getting it to JSN and whatnot. Can you imagine that being Marvin Harrison Jr.? Did you see what they did going head to head with the Los Angeles Rams and whatnot? And Klint Kubiak actually calls plays. He actually orchestrates an offense. Meanwhile, Michael Floor is just somebody that we're just going to try to pull off the tree like the apple from the tree and whatnot, just to hope to God that we get some of that same knowledge, that same ability that like his coach, who we all wish he would retire, or we could bring over ourselves and whatnot, or at least bring over that knowledge to ourselves, that we could be able to do that ourselves. So I don't have any problem with being able to get somebody that I know certifiably gave us 2 days and most likely would take the job if it's offered, and not even have some of the craziest type of like offers given to him, seeing that he's more of like a guy who's just an understudy. If we knew that he was going to be probably the guy that was going to be the most obtainable out of all the guys, and Klint Kubiak was going to be somebody that we would hope that we could be able to sign, but it was going to be super hard to obtain that guy. So I just I don't know what positive I see out of this, unless the interview takes place and tomorrow, for some wild reason, we start getting some of the chirps about like, hey, Clint's really they really like the meeting with each other. Cardinals are going to wait till the Super Bowl's done, and hopefully after that we end up with our next head coach. In that situation, yeah, sure, but people are going to be nervous for the next week or so, because Michael LaFleur might just say within from now to next week, I'm done. I'm
Yeah,
just going
and
back to the
we
Rams.
saw the Cardinals previously wait till the Super Bowl for Jonathan Gannon. And we saw that with waiting so long, they weren't able to bring in the best staff. They had a lot of first-time guys, a lot of former college guys. They had a good coordinator pairing. That was like, honestly, like when you talk about where it was a bad coordinator pairing, good coordinator pairing, they made it 3 years for both of them. That's usually more than you didn't have to fire a coordinator partway through. They had Jeff Rodgers already in the building. But a lot of the other coaches underneath, they just were not able to get to the same level. Now, some of those guys have gotten other interviews for jobs. Drew Terrell got interviews for some jobs, but it really was a case where they had to go to the college ranks. They couldn't even get a professional NFL offensive line coach in, and it took a lot of growing pains this first year. We didn't really see until the end of this season the offensive line actually start to produce with some of the guys that had been here with the college offensive line coach. So you're talking about time frame being an issue. The Cardinals have always been one of the last to hire, means they don't get the best jump. Waiting another week and a half plus for the Super Bowl, to me, doesn't seem like it makes the most amount of sense. It does if the coach is good enough. So if you're the Cardinals and you're going to say, hey, we think that we got a shot at Klint Kubiak, we're going to wait these next 2 weeks and see, only for him to pick the Raiders, that makes you look stupid. Like, it makes you look dumb if that's going to be the case, because you're getting behind in all of these other things. And the Raiders are going to be a team that are going to also have backup plans. So Ejiro Evero is still considered to be in the mix. So with Davis Webb pulling out, you put Ejiro Evero in. I think that this is more what you would call the leverage play, Marcos, where, hey, we're not going to put we got all of our ducks in a row, but we're not going to put all of our eggs in one basket, as the metaphor would go with Klint Kubiak. We still can talk to Ejiro Evero. It's kind of like how the Cardinals are going to be in a space where they could look at it with Mike LaFleur and have that as a backup plan. It seems though like this is really the A plan, and I think that the Raiders are going to give their best shot for Kubiak, whereas the Cardinals, it feels like they would have to blow him away. I think that we need to talk a little bit more, Marcos, about when it comes to the Cardinals and some of their plan. If this falls through, let's say that we find out, hey, on Saturday, Mike LaFleur re-ups with the Rams. He's going to be back with them for another year. Saturday, Klint Kubiak, he goes and is going to probably be the next head coach for the Raiders. They're going to wait around for him. He declines to interview with Arizona, further declines the Arizona job, even if they offer it to him. You don't have some very good options that are going to be left. So we've talked a little bit about Mike LaFleur as being the best option, but let's say that Klint Kubiak, this is our worst case scenario, he goes and says, I'm going to go back to Seattle for a year. I got a chance to coach Joe Burrow versus Fernando Mendoza. Maybe that's something that he prefers. Cardinals' options really are going to dwindle down to maybe a Vance Joseph. You have to bring a Chris Shula back into the building. You're going to be looking at Anthony Weaver. You're going to be looking at Raheem Morris. Those are all some of the different options that the Cardinals are looking at, and it's not very pretty, which is where a lot of Cardinals fans were saying, just go get Mike LaFleur, sell him on the job, make him your number one choice. Now it's going to be very clear post Klint Kubiak, he would not be the Cardinals' first choice if he gets hired to be the Cardinals' head coach. That's just something that's not going to be a great look, but it is unfortunately just the way that things can sometimes go in the National Football League, because this is not a highly desirable franchise for people to go to. And that's, I think, Marcos, there's only one way that changes. It changes if the Cardinals come in and have a top-notch, top-of-the-line quarterback. One of the reasons why Jonathan Gannon picked the Cardinals was because he had confidence and faith in Kyler Murray. Now, clearly we can say a couple years down the road, maybe Gannon's faith was a bit misplaced, and maybe the faith in Jonathan Gannon and his defense was a bit misplaced. It was not a good match overall for both sides, and Cardinals have moved on. They're probably going to move on from Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray seems set and ready to move on. I think what a lot of Cardinals fans want to avoid is this right here with avoiding Vance Joseph. Instead of saying, hey, we've got a new take, a fresh take, an offensive mind, we're going to go out there, bring in a former head coach at least who's got experience to help this young mind, and then we're going to compete in the NFC West with someone who knows the NFC West. Instead, you may be going to a Vance Joseph. A lot of Cardinals fans, I think, Marcos, are dreading the fact that this may be one of those places where if you're talking about, let's say you're going looking for who's going to go to the dance, there's one girl who wants to go to the dance with you. She's got one arm and one leg, and she's like, not quite the prettiest girl. And I don't want to like come across as like being super negative, at least in all of this, but like, let's just look at the reality of that's not going to be the most attractive pairing when it comes to what you're looking for. And that's one of the places, at least, where you're like, I don't think it's the worst case in the world if Vance Joseph comes in, but I think that there could be so many better cases, and it's that feeling of regret Cardinals fans, I think, would have if that's what came to pass.
Well, our buddies at Seattle Overload podcast, I remember one of them had mentioned that when it came to Vance Joseph, he made a really good point. And would it be the worst thing? In my opinion, you already know how I feel about Vance Joseph. The NFC West really knew how to attack this type of defense, and they talked about how with Vance Joseph, you really have to have a good offense to be able to have ball control, to be able to move the ball, eat up the clock and whatnot, and at least be able to take the lead. So it would be like the type of offense that gets the ball first, takes maybe a 7 to 10 point lead, and at that point, he could do what's best, which is be aggressive and blitz. And obviously the quarterback has to drop back the majority of the time in that circumstance. But when you are behind or you're even with the guy, he's just going to be in a shootout situation where his defense is going to give up like points. And you got to also think about it. When he comes over here, is he going to have the same type of talent that he has over there? And if he has the full autonomy to be able to do whatever he wants on the defensive side, I mean, it's just it just to me it wouldn't be good. It would be a situation where I would love for him to avoid being fired on his first year being back, because the fan base is not going to be accepting of it. You don't know who you're going to bring over as an offensive coordinator. All the good ones have either been taken or they're going somewhere, or they are declaring where they're going to go. And at this point, who are you going to snatch up? You're not going to get Michael Floyd to pull a lateral move at that point.
Yeah, and that's the case, at least, is that it's really tough to be able to go from a team like the Rams, which is contending for Super Bowls, to the Cardinals, who are contending for last place in the division. Let's see if there's any sort of final thoughts that we can have. I know it's a shorter podcast tonight, but ultimately, like, this is a spot where there hasn't been very much news. The biggest other news that we have, at least it's out there, is the Cardinals' Larry Fitzgerald is in line for Canton. Right now, we saw that Bill Belichick is not going to be voted in as a unanimous Hall of Famer, but Larry Fitzgerald's chances of being a first ballot Hall of Famer is actually pretty good. Marcos, this to me seems like it's a slam dunk, and in a lot of ways, it should be, because Larry was always decent and nice to the media. He was someone who produced. I think a lot of people's question about Fitzgerald, if there is any, would be that he didn't produce as much as other receivers did because of his quarterback situation. I think that when it comes to his Hall of Fame resume, a lot of that in the 2008 postseason plus 2015 postseason with those crazy catches that he had. He's in the final 15 for the Hall of Fame class. I think he gets there, and I think he will be a first ballot Hall of Famer. It's his 5th year, I believe, after he's retired, so he is going to be eligible. He never said that he was retired, but this probably, Marcos, would be the first time we could get confirmation that, yes, indeed, Larry Fitzgerald has retired from the game when he goes into the Hall of Fame. It's one of those things, at least, where ultimately I think that he's going to get in. I think that he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, which is kind of surprising. So the question is, should Bill Belichick be a first ballot Hall of Famer, or is Larry Fitzgerald undeserving of being a first ballot Hall of Famer? Because if Bill Belichick isn't, then does that mean that Fitzgerald isn't deserving? I'm curious for some of your thoughts on all of that, because I am very much in the perspective that it should be the easiest decision out there for the voters to make.
Well, unfortunately, Bill Belichick has been involved in what you would say is like a post like career downfall. Not so much saying like, hey, he's not the great coach that we always knew. He's one of the best defensive minds that ever came into the game, and of course, it tarnished his reputation when he moved off of Tom Brady, and they didn't find success afterwards. But that stuff that's going on in North Carolina is what I would believe is withholding him from being able to go there and to be able to be voted in as a first ballot Hall of Famer because that stuff is just quite frankly, it's kind of creepy, and I don't like how he's going with his reputation and whatnot. Plus, you have the son like the instances of like Spygate being one of them as or yeah, I think it's Spygate where he was recording signals and whatnot. Do I think it's the biggest deal in the world on that one? No, not really, because you still have to go out there and play football. But there's just too much on his reputation afterwards. Whereas, like with Larry Fitzgerald, he has a clean career. He's gone out gracefully. He didn't even let us know that he was going to retire. That's one of the things that shows how selfless he is. He didn't want a ceremony. He didn't want people clapping for the last time for him to put his hand up and wave bye to the crowd while people are crying on the in like in their seats because we're never going to see him again as an Arizona Cardinal. He gave us all those years, then stayed loyal to the franchise. Even if he had a chance to go to other franchises to win a Super Bowl or to try to compete for one, he decided, no, I am a Cardinal. I mean, who can you think about that's more selfless than that? Like, he really didn't want like the publicity.
Yeah, it was just someone who kind of embodied with a lot of places when you talk about like never meeting your heroes. Everyone who's met Larry at least has said that there's been just nothing but positive feelings. Now, obviously, there was, of course, the TMZ report from a number of years ago that never has had anything that really popped up with that. There's been a lot of involvement within the community that's popped up. Like, I think it's worth always mentioning because it gets easily glossed over. But he's one of those guys that if you're talking about building a statue out of, I think that he 100% deserves to get a statue across from Pat Tillman outside of the Cardinal Stadium just for the player person that he has been. And it's a really interesting case also of he probably, if the Cardinals had gotten a touchdown and been able to get a stop on defense, that touchdown in the Super Bowl run would have been considered one of the greatest plays in NFL history. Of course, Santonio Holmes gets that toe tapping touchdown, of course, at least, which most Cardinals fans will still say was not in bounds. That's one of the things I know that a lot of Cardinals fans will say. It is one of the cases where everything that he did for the most part on an NFL field was always with an air of humility. And I think it's also notable that he was still making great plays, even in his last few seasons where he only would average about 100 catches for 700 yards. You still think of the last game that he played where he caught one of those touchdowns against the Eagles. And the commentating was just, did he catch that? Did he really catch that? Oh my goodness, what a grab. And that, to me, sums up what is the point of a wide receiver? It's to catch the ball for a touchdown. That's what the whole point is, and that's one thing that Larry Fitzgerald did better than pretty much anyone outside of maybe with the likes of a Jerry Rice, maybe with an athletic freak like a Calvin Johnson. To me, he should be up there on the Mount Rushmore of NFL athletes at the wide receiver position. So let's get some final thoughts at least here as we go back in. We got some overtime now with our Redbird Reboot podcast. Again, not as much news that's popped up according to this week because we are waiting on the Cardinals coaching search. Rest assured, we'll be back with a emergency podcast when the Cardinals do make a move at head coaching spot. And then we'll have some more content with our regularly scheduled show next week. We're moving to Thursdays now for those of you guys who are looking. So if you guys love enjoying our content and are interested in our updated schedule, with our overtime content, we've got someone who says we need my dating history. Apparently, they had some questions about whether my comparisons came from real life. I can say that did not, for the most part, come from anything there. Just a great metaphor to be able to use. Marcos, let's get some final predictions. Who is the next head coach of the Arizona Cardinals? Let's go with you picking first, and then I'll pick.
Well, unfortunately, the reality of Michael Bidwell being the guy who's going to be in charge is going to probably be Vance Joseph. I do not want that situation because of the offensive coordinator situation that we are going to find ourselves in. Hey, they might as well just bring back Mike McCoy at that point because it's already going to be a crappy year. What I do think that would kind of signal is that, hey, we're going to go on a kind of like a tank year, and then hopefully get one of the quarterbacks in next year's class, and then probably fire the staff and start all over because this is what I mean. This is giving me absolutely no confidence that these guys are gonna zero in on and I just would have much rather them hire Mike LaFleur, not put us in this situation, and if they're gonna do this, get Klint Kubiak, be serious about it. But if you're not gonna be serious about it, then my faith is gone, and it's gonna be Vance Joseph is gonna be announced next week.
Yeah, I'm not going to go as far as Vance Joseph, but I also cannot go as far as saying the Cardinals are going to blow Klint Kubiak away and he's going to be their next head coach. I'd love to hear it. I think that would be their number one option. That'd be the top option for the NFC West offensive guy who can know it. I'll go ahead and say I think it'll be Mike LaFleur anyway. I think they'll go back to Mike LaFleur. I think LaFleur, if he's pulled out of the Cardinals job because he's waiting to see if the Raiders job opens up potentially or if he goes back there. I don't know if the Rams are ready to have him back. I think that Sean McVay could look forward to having another coach hired from his coaching tree and to be a head coach because that would be just as big a deal as it was for Sean Payton to be a coach who was traded for, is to have guys on your tree be head coaches. I think that it'll be him. We also, I think if he was not going to be the Cardinals option, it's been enough time with it being Thursday. We wake up on Friday morning and he does not have a new deal with the Rams to go back to be their offensive coordinator or offensive play caller, a little bit of a pay bump. Maybe it's just assistant head coach that you end up seeing from him, which right now belongs to a Chris Shula. So I don't think Shula would give that up. I don't think there's a spot for him to go any higher. But unless that sort of a new structured deal pops up on Friday morning, I think he's going to be holding out for the Arizona job. And I could see him pairing up potentially with maybe not Raheem Morris, but it would be interesting to see who the DC hire would be in that regard. Because that would put him back with someone he has worked with twice before. That'll be my pick, at least. I think that it'll be more likely them or Anthony Weaver over Vance Joseph, and I'll hold on to that. I'll say it's going to be one of those two guys and not Vance Joseph as my final prediction for the Cardinals' next head coach. Hey, guys, that'll wrap it up for us. We've only been here 40 minutes. We got a nice long podcast going through all of the coaching hires. I'm going to get working getting uploaded tonight. If you do want to catch our past show, you can also find it on YouTube. Thank you guys for tuning in. I know it was something where we were hoping the Cardinals would have a head coach hired by this point. Not to be the case, unfortunately. Marcos, why don't you sign us off at least with where the viewers are able to find your content online?
Well, as usual, you can find me on X on @PancakeSoul. You have the Twitter handle right there. I think it might not be spelled right. Yeah, it is spelled right. Anyways, you can find it there, and you can find us on the Cardinal Rule on YouTube. And whenever you guys want to interact, just go to the YouTube side.
That's right. And you can follow me at BlakeMurphy7 on Twitter /X.com, as well as make sure that you're following at Redbird Reboot. We'll have all of our live shows will be there. Our content will be having the best of our content that we'll be putting out there. Will show up onto that feed as well. So make sure that you're following. Guys, the Cardinals are still hunting for their head coach. We're still waiting for that reboot to officially kick off. But for now, it's time for us to log off. Until next time, everyone. Thank you guys again so much for tuning in, and go Cardinals.
See you guys.